Hi, Gail.
Oh, there's Gail. Hi, Gail.
Hey, everyone.
Good
Brent.
morning.
Gail, we're broadcasting now.
Congratulations, Sam. I'm very sad to read this news.
I'm happy that you're sad, I guess.
Oh, that's very
I'm kind of sad too.
sweet for sure.
So we should wait to trickle in. There's still more guests coming in.
Yeah, there's a bunch attendees are coming in.
Authoritarian leaders maintain tight control. That's just in the authority. Right? Authoritarian leaders can help various types of companies be successful. This one, right?
All right, why don't we get started? Good morning, I'm Sam Schuckett, the Executive Officer of the Coastal Conservancy. I want to make a few announcements before we start the meeting. First of all, I want to thank Chris Crossley, one of our IT people. Chris has been in the office since very early this morning, getting our servers back online. The air conditioning in the server room went down, and so the servers crashed. And that was the crisis just before the board meeting.
Is that because of the air conditioning unit that crashed in Oakland too?
It could be. Yeah. Chris and Andrew Ayung, our two IT people, often have to work when the rest of us are asleep. And today was one of those days. And I want to thank Chris for hurrying in to the building and getting us back online. So thank you, Chris. The next thing I wanted to do by way of introduction is make a land acknowledgement. So I'm here in North Oakland, California, in the East Bay, and this is the ancestral homeland of the Muwekma Ohlone tribe. And I think it's important and useful to start the meeting by acknowledging that all of the projects the Conservancy is considering today are located on unceded ancestral homelands of many different tribes who lived and inhabited and cared for the lands of California for many thousands of years. So please join me in acknowledging these lands and the native peoples who are the original and ongoing stewards. The Conservancy is working to honor the relationship between California's native people and the land throughout the reach of our work. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty. Unfortunately, I'll probably still be sitting on Ohlone land 2 months from now at our next meeting, because I expect that we will still be on Zoom. So I'll have to think of something different to say at that meeting. I have some logistical announcements. So Conservancy members, oversight members, if and when any join us, our board clerk, Annalika White, our chief counsel, Amy Roach, our IT staff, and I are all logged into Zoom as panelists. Everyone else attending this meeting, including other Conservancy staff, grant applicants, and other members of the public, are logged in as audience members or attendees. And right now, I'd like to share a video that provides instructions for participating in this public meeting. So go ahead and run the video.
Welcome to the board meeting of the California State Coastal Conservancy. Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted over Zoom teleconference pursuant to the provisions of Governor's Executive Order N-2920. The Chair will call upon board members, presenters, staff, and other speakers by name and ask that they speak clearly and state their names before giving comments. If you do not wish to state your name, you are not required to do so. The Conservancy will take public comments on each agenda item prior to taking action on or completing discussion of that item. The Conservancy will take public comments on matters that do not relate to a specific agenda item and closed session items during public comments on non-agenda items. If you wish to comment on a consent calendar item, please raise your hand when the chair announces the consent calendar. Before, during, or after public comment on the consent calendar, the chair may move items from the consent calendar to the regular calendar for a full hearing at either the same meeting or a later meeting. In order to make a public comment at the appropriate times in the agenda, please raise your hand using the raise hand option on Zoom or dialing *9 from a phone. Then wait to be called upon to speak. If you are attending by phone, you will be unmuted. If you are attending on Zoom, when it is your turn to speak, you will be moved into the participant panel so that you can appear on camera. You may see a blue circle on your screen as you are moved from attendee to participant. Once you are a participant, if you wish to appear on camera, you must turn your camera on. At the end of your comment, you will be moved back to attendee. Phone participants will be re-muted. Public comments will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. This may be adjusted by the chair depending on how many people wish to speak on a particular item. Public comments on non-agenda items will be limited to a total time of 45 minutes. If you sent us a public comment by email or voicemail before 5 p.m. yesterday, it will be entered into the record and shared with the Conservancy members, but will not be read aloud. If you submitted a comment in advance of the meeting, you do not need to repeat it during the meeting, though you are welcome to do so. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. The chat feature will be disabled for the duration of the meeting.
Thank you for that. I just want to note, we didn't update the video, but in fact, public comment on non-agenda items will be 30 minutes at this meeting. And just to reiterate, if you want to comment, you push the raise your hand button if you're in Zoom, *9 if you're on the phone. And once you've made your comment, it's very helpful to us if you then put your hand down, which you do the same way. So we will remind people about these instructions throughout the meeting. I want to thank all the Conservancy staff for keeping the agency and these meetings running during the pandemic. I ask the public to continue to have patience with us as we work through the various technical glitches that occur in Zoom land all the time. If you need any assistance during the meeting, you can email public comment, all one word, at scc.ca.gov. That's public comments with an S at scc.ca.gov. Operators are standing by. Anne, would you go ahead and call the roll?
Thank you, Sam. Good morning, Chair Bosco, board members. I will ask you guys to unmute yourself now. I will go ahead and call the roll. All right. Gail, you want to unmute? Sorry. Ms. Nono?
Present.
Mr. Padilla?
Present.
Mr. Cash?
Here.
Ms. Gutierrez Groundage?
Present.
Ms. Miller?
Present.
Mr. Alioto?
Here.
Chair Bosco?
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you, Anne. Doug, take it away.
Thank you very much and welcome everyone to the January 2021 meeting of the State Coastal Conservancy. I want to belatedly wish you all a happy new year. I think this has got to be a better year than the last. And I'm hoping that at some point during this year, we will again be able to meet in person. I personally miss not seeing all of you and the people that come before us and our staff. And hopefully we'll be able to get back to that. But until then, of course, we'll be meeting as we are now on Zoom. Members of the board, please signal if you want to make a motion or have a comment so that I'm sure to call on you. And we'll also need, of course, a second to any motion. And any of the actions that we take must be by roll call. At this point, I'd like to introduce the members of the Conservancy Board. Annie Nodoff is appointed by the Senate. Marcia Hanscom is appointed by the Assembly. Steve Padilla is the president of the Coastal Commission. Is he called president now or chair?
Chairman, Mr.
Chairman, okay. Chairman of the Coastal Commission. Brian Cash is appointed to represent the Resources Agency. Gail Miller represents the Department of Finance, and Joseph Alioto is appointed by the governor. I was appointed by Governor Brown. And I think we don't have oversight members present right now, but if they do arrive, we'll introduce them. Okay, let's go on to approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any comments or changes to the minutes of our last meeting? If not, Annie, will you call the roll, please, or Ann?
Yes. Do we want to take a second and motion first?
Oh, all right. Ms. Nodoff, do you want to move and Mr. Cash second that we approve the minutes?
Yes, move approval of the minutes.
All right.
Second.
All right, I'm calling the roll now. Ms. Nodoff,
Aye.
Mr. Padilla,
Aye.
Mr. Cash,
Aye.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Ms. Gutierrez Groundage,
Aye.
Mr. Alioto,
Aye.
Chair Bosco.
Aye.
This motion passes. The minutes is approved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And next, we will have public comments on matters that are not on the agenda. As the little film that we saw indicated, these comments should be limited to about 3 minutes. And the total limit on this time for comments is 30 minutes. Please raise your hand or star 9 if you would like to speak, so we can determine now how much time to allow for each speaker.
Okay, and I'll be keeping time. You'll hear the little beeper thing on my phone go off when we get to 3 minutes. And just as a reminder, once we put you into the speaker column, if you could take your hand down, that would be helpful for us. I've got 5 hands up right now. First up will be Walter Lamb, and he'll be followed by Robert Van de Hoek. So go ahead, Walter. I think you're in.
Yes, thank you, board members. Good morning. I'm Walter Lamb, representing the Biona Wetlands Land Trust. I suspect that you will hear a lot of information about the recently certified EIR for Biona Wetlands. I wanted to focus my comments on how I believe that will affect you as board members. We have until the 29th to file our CEQA challenge to that EIR. You can never be certain of an outcome in these cases, but we have a high level of confidence that the certification will be vacated. I think the way this impacts you, however, is that it's our understanding that you'll be asked to allocate more money to shore up the existing alternative that was adopted in the certification. And what we would propose is that it would be better to hear what the courts say. You know, we don't know if the courts will agree with none of our arguments or all of our arguments or somewhere in between. But for any argument that the court does agree with us on, right, that would be a deficiency that would need to get corrected, and that's going to cost some money. And so we're concerned that money, in addition to the substantial amounts of money that you've previously allocated to this project, that more money would just sort of go down that same path without even understanding what the courts might say needs to be fixed. And I want to point out that, you know, obviously a CEQA court challenge is very different than these meetings. The things that people feel comfortable saying in a press release or in public comment to an agency are very different. When you go into court, those things have to be supported by substantial evidence so that the conversation really changes. And it's a good opportunity to filter out a lot of the noise. And I'll just give you one example of the kind of thing that we would challenge on. By the way, it doesn't matter what our opinion is. It can't just be that we don't like the project. We have to prove one of two things. Either that the certification didn't proceed in a manner prescribed by law, or that findings weren't supported by, or not reasonably supported by substantial evidence. So I won't get into all of the things that we feel are wrong with the project. And I think the biggest is just that the project acknowledges that it does not protect critical wetland habitats for more than a matter of decades, right? Not even past what would hopefully be the lifetime of my 9-year-old daughter. So things like the salt pan habitat are openly acknowledged that the project would only extend that 10 years against the baseline of doing absolutely nothing. And so no wetland organization would say, well, I guess we just have to say goodbye to the salt pan. It had a good run. We'd like to see some alternatives that would preserve the salt pan. And more importantly, all of the marsh habitat, this plan would eventually put on a path to be submerged. It would disappear. The maps in the draft in the EIR show that. So that's the first thing we'll point out. Then we'll point out that although that's acknowledged, there's not really a lot of analysis to say what's the impact of that. It looks like Belding Savannah sparrow is a species that will be extirpated in a matter of time based on this alternative. And so we'll talk about the lack of analysis. But no, sorry, is that the end of my time?
Yeah, that's 3 minutes, Walter. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Robert Van de Hoek. Robert will be followed by Suzanne Cumming.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. And give you my photo. There I am with the Sierra Club photograph of Ansel Adams, black and white, of the Owens Valley, a long way from the coast. I'm speaking to you from away from the coast too, but still in Los Angeles County. Nice to see your smile, Joseph, too. Thumbs up, yeah. And I am speaking from Tataviam land, sometimes during the mission period called the Fernandino culture of the North San Fernando Valley and Santa Clarita Valley region. And I'm speaking to you about an issue at the coast, another tribal area to the south of the Tataviam, which is the Tongva people of the Los Angeles, San Gabriel Valley and the Biona Wetlands and Topanga and that part of the coast. And I am interested to speak to you as a scientist, individual, as a scientist and as an individual, and as a plaintiff that has a lawsuit against the Conservancy, and as a member of Defend Biona Wetlands, an organization, unincorporated collaboration of members that's also in the lawsuit. As one of the 4 plaintiffs that are individuals, I'm the only man, and I'm a white man, but I'm not a white supremacist. I am an ecofeminist. I have a peace symbol I always wear. I'm totally from Holland, an immigrant, naturalist. I want there to be a Department of Peace in the US government at some point. And there are bills that go to the Congress each year by a congressional member, but it doesn't get far. I wish to, as one of the plaintiffs, I want the lawsuit to go away that we've brought to you. You're going to be discussing it in closed session today, and it's been brought, you've discussed it, I think in the last month or 2 in closed session previously, and we identified your executive director, Sam Schuckett, individually too. I want to lay out our reasoning and give you a hint of our strategy in the spirit of transparency. And I wish I could be in your closed session or that we could hear. It kind of bugs me that you are members of the public and you're appointed there, but you're discussing our lawsuit in closed session. But be that as it may, we are thinking of amending our lawsuit to include First Amendment and free speech issues in terms of the collaborative role that Conservancy is doing with the Bay Foundation and the Department of Fish and Wildlife that's preventing the public from being able to access the area. I can see my time is up, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Suzanne Cumming, and she will be followed by Lisa Levinson.
Hi, Suzanne Cumming. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes?
you're on, Suzanne.
Thank you. Good morning, board members and staff. Thanks for this opportunity. I'm speaking as an attorney, also as an individual and member of Sierra Club and Defend Biona. Let's have public access to the Biona wetlands now. You know that there's wildlife there. There's a beautiful gate, bike racks, and signage already there. The gate on Fiji has been locked for years. Signs on this publicly owned land say private, keep out. As you heard, the EIR was just certified, but the bulldozing option is far from certain. As the state has to start all over with the Army Corps of Engineers due to flood risk standards that were not properly used in the planning. 7 years of bulldozers and tractors? I ask that you please consider supporting the no bulldozing general alternative option 4. It's a 20-point plan for public access. It's a nature-based solution. If you and your staff don't have a copy, please let me know and I'll get one for you. My favorite is point number 7, and that says, install 1 or 2 bald eagle nesting platforms along the south levee of Biona Creek and devise a program similar to the successful one at Catalina Island, where high school students feed the young eagles as they're growing up. On January 12th, the LA Times printed an article titled, Bald Eagle's Egg Becomes Online Hit, about a webcam on a nest in Big Bear. This can happen here, and how wonderful that would be for everybody. Please read all of the 20-point plan. There are lots of really great ideas that can be done now. 7 years of bulldozers and tractors? Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you.
Next is Lisa Levinson, followed by Christina Koo.
Hi there. Thank you so much for this opportunity. So my name's Lisa Levinson, and I work with In Defense of Animals, which represents 250,000 supporters. Over 12,000 of them sent letters to stop the counterfeit restoration project that would bulldoze Biona Wetlands Ecological Reserve. The gentle alternative that a couple other people have mentioned doesn't use heavy machinery to restore Biona wetlands. Bulldozers and excavators would adversely impact the 7 federally endangered species, dozens of special status species, and thousands of animals who thrive there now. 3 endangered species, the least Bell's vireo, Ridgway's clapper rail, and El Segundo blue butterfly, have recently returned to Biona without heavy machinery altering the habitat. The gentle alternative fosters species recovery with special programs outlined in the 20-point plan and implements new interpretive programs that teach environmental sustainability and stewardship. Please review and support the gentle alternative, which is available at defendbionawetlands.org. In Defense of Animals supports the gentle alternative, and we hope that you will too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa. Christina Koo, and will be followed by Marcia Hanscom.
Hello.
Good morning, Christina.
Okay. Hi, there I am. Okay. Hi, everybody. So, yes, I am, a member of the public. I live in Southern California, and I was interested in, in this issue with the Biona wetlands. And I started with some of the Coastal Commission meetings. And I learned a lot more information. I continue to join more meetings. And I'll tell you, my community and we were just appalled to find out some of the conflicts of interest. And this was when I learned learned about the leader of our, Fish and Wildlife Department trying to negotiate building extravagant homes at one of the ecological reserves in San Diego. So that's when I really wanted to get more involved, and I couldn't believe that kind of conflict of interest can occur within, departments that are supposed to save our wilderness and wildlife. So that was really upsetting. Continue to learn more about this conflict of interest with other executive directors of other conservancy or government organizations. And they actually called us, some of the public speakers, trolls while we're on the calls when we try to explain what the Biona wetlands were all about and why we need to save them, why the counter plans actually means destruction. And being called trolls, I've mentioned this on the meetings, it really upset me. And I told a lot of my, community members and friends and neighbors. And that's what motivated me to continue to be involved. And I can see why speaking up is so important, especially when we have leaders of government organizations that are not very friendly to us. So, and then the next thing I learned is that, let's see, here is a former employee of the Mountain and Recreation Conservation Authority. She's a former employee and currently now an employee at an organization that is pushing to just basically destroy the Biona wetlands. Now she's saying in meetings that claiming Area A of the wetlands is just all depleted of any value, no ecological value at all. And I come to learn that, researching back, that the group she was with, the MRCA, had said the complete opposite. And they documented how much life and wildlife and all the plants were thriving there when they were asking for money to have stewardship over it. And they wanted money for educational programs. And now they say there's just no use for any educational programs. So I'm just finding this to be so disingenuous, and to put this in public. I mean, I feel like there's stronger words to describe what's happened here, but disingenuous is definitely happening. And I hope that you all do the right thing to save the wetland.
Thank you.
Next up is Marcia Hanscom. Marcia looks to be the last person with their hand up. So go ahead, Marcia. Marcia, you have to unmute yourself. Unmute. There you go.
Okay. Honorable board members and staff, Marcia Hanscom. Behind me, you see a photograph of the Biona Wetlands Ecological Reserve. And there are people who want to dig up 2.5 million cubic yards of soil, life-filled soils, move it all around. The area right behind me would be covered up with a big berm. You don't destroy a village to save it. Anybody remember that? That was the Vietnam War. Well, that's what we're talking about here. The plans are to destroy the wetlands and start over. In 30 years of working to protect wetlands and coastal habitats in California, I have never seen a project proposed like this that has been called a restoration. I feel like I'm Alice in the looking glass, through the looking glass, because everything that is being said by the people who want to do this is the opposite of what is there. I started working on the Biona wetlands in 1995. In 2003, I sat in Governor Gray Davis' office with his staff working to determine the last acreage that would be included in a huge acquisition plan. 640 acres of land are now protected supposedly, but this plan would not protect them. It would be like it's as if this picture behind me was a parking lot, and that would be okay. If it was a parking lot and you were gonna rip it up and put some habitat in, that would be great, but that is not what's here. We have the white-tailed kite. Every single coastal commission hearing I've been to in 30 years where the white-tailed kite is on a property, that stops any development. It's got its own law in this state. And we have 3 of them right now here at Biona, and they're there because of the grasslands part of the ecological reserve. Grasslands are one of the most rare habitats in California, according to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Now, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife is sponsoring this project and now certified an EIR, yet most of their specialists, their special habitat scientists who I know and think very highly of, have not been the ones putting this project forward or even reviewing it. The Bay Foundation, a private organization, put this together in collaboration with staff from this agency, the State Coastal Conservancy, with a lot of money. Millions of dollars has been spent over more than 12 years to plan a project that now we find out the engineering used the wrong flood risk standards. So there are lots of problems here, and I really hope you can intercede. Our current governor said to me, I want to partner with you and help protect this place when he came to see it. Of course, he's been very busy with many other things, but I.
Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you.
Next is Jane Velez Mitchell.
I'm going to unmute and start my video. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're on.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'm addressing the proposed destruction of the Biona Wetlands Ecological Reserve. The last coastal wetlands in LA, home to 1,700 species, some endangered, some threatened. This is not something we're just saying. There are photographs documenting all these species that live in the Biona wetlands. And I live near the Biona wetlands and I see these species every day. So where will the burrowing owls go? Where will the barn owls go? Where will the great horned owls go? Where will the gray foxes go? All of these animals and hundreds more have been documented inside the wetlands. These wetlands are not dead and dying as bulldozing proponents claim. The wetlands are thriving, teeming with wild animals that have nowhere else to live. The proponents of the Biona Wetlands Ecological Reserve bulldozing brush off these questions. They actually suggest that after a decade of bulldozing and excavation, the wildlife will magically reappear. They seem oblivious to the fact that we are currently in the midst of the 6th mass extinction, and the biggest culprit is the elimination of wildlife habitat. Scientists warn of a domino effect where extinction breeds extinction. While environmentally minded Americans deplore the destruction of the Pantanal, the world's largest tropical wetlands in Brazil, we apparently hold ourselves to a different standard. Do what we say, not what we do. Now, bulldozing proponents talk about the need for greater public access. We could provide significantly more public access to the wetlands right now by unlocking the large gates that keep the public from existing trails. This $250 million bulldozing plan will take at least a decade. During that time, there will be no public access. You know, as a Latina who lives here, I really find it offensive that essentially this project is hiding behind the idea that we're providing public access to inner city kids, when in fact it's going to hurt inner city kids. Kids who are 10 today will be in their 20s by the time this plan is completed. In the next decade, experts predict there will be a significant shift toward autonomous vehicles and transportation as a service, freeing up huge amounts of space as parking lots are phased out. This would allow for numerous public parks in and around LA that experts estimate would be the size of at least 2 small cities. There are many innovative ways to create more green public space without destroying critical habitat upon which so many species rely. And in an alliance of environmentalists, biologists, and animal welfare advocates under the banner Defend Biona Wetlands has offered a thoughtful and detailed 20-point gentle restoration plan that would provide the best of both worlds: public access now, or at least as soon as safe following the pandemic, while conducting genuine restoration. Please, please be on the right side of history.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It doesn't look like we have any other public comment speakers.
Okay. Thank you to all who took the time and effort to comment. We appreciate your participation. We'll now move on to the consent calendar. These are items that are $250,000 or less, or have already been considered by the Conservancy in the past. Are there any members that would like to remove an item from the consent calendar? All right, if not, do I hear a motion that we approve the consent calendar?
I'll move, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Ms. Miller moves and Mr. Cash seconds that we approve the consent calendar. And would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Noddle?
Aye.
Mr. Padilla?
Aye.
Mr. Cash?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Gutierrez Groundage?
Aye.
Mr. Alioto?
Aye.
And Chair Bosco.
Aye.
Okay, this motion passes. Agenda item number 4 is approved.
Thank you, Ann. Next, we have our executive officer report. Sam?
Thank you, Chairman Bosco. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. There's 4 items on the EO report today. We only need to consider 3 of them. We won't have a legislative report. There's not much really to report yet on legislation, although as Brian and Gail would tell you, the budget hearings have been moved up a month. They'll be in February, which is an unhappy thing, I think, for the people that have to attend them. But other than that, there's not a lot to report from Sacramento. So first up is a discussion of adopting a process to hire a new executive officer, that is to replace me. And I have provided you all with a set of recommendations for how to go about doing that, along with the current duty statement that's in the format that, essentially positions are required to be in the format within the state system. I thought it might be useful and informative, since we were chatting about it a little bit before the meeting started, just to give you some insights into why I'm leaving now. It certainly isn't because I don't like this job. In fact, I love this job. I've greatly enjoyed working with the staff. I like working with all of you. I think, as I pointed out in something that I published earlier, I've spent basically half of my professional life here. It's been fabulous and rewarding. And as Brian Cash and I were talking about a few days ago, I can travel anywhere in coastal California and see things that we have done that will have a very high level of permanence, and that's very satisfying. But I'll be 61 next year. Based on my parents' longevity, I can reasonably expect another 30 years, but you never know. And based on watching my parents, I can reasonably think 20 of those will be fun. The last 10 years, not so much fun. And there are other things that I want to do. In particular, I want to return to a more political activist stance. I've been extremely distressed at the last 4 years in our country. And before I came to work here, I was working with progressive organizations in states all over the United States, state-based organizations, and that's what I want to return to as on a volunteer basis. In addition, of course, to perfecting my saxophone skills and riding my bike and doing all of those other things. So. And speaking as a musician, I believe strongly on ending the solo and leaving people wanting more. So I'm endeavoring to leave you wanting more, as opposed to staying past my sell-by date, which is always a possibility. So that's just to give you some insight into my thinking and into my plans. So I've suggested a fairly straightforward process, and this needs to be an action item for you today. Of course, both who you choose and how you choose them is entirely up to you. So you're not bound to, do it the way that I'm suggesting, but this is a pretty common way of going about doing it. Under the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, you can appoint an advisory subcommittee of 2 people who can work without having public meetings, and they can finalize the job announcement. They can review applications. They can prepare the application ranking criteria and interview questions. They can interview candidates, all with an eye towards presenting all of you with a small number, not more than 4 finalists. I think when I was hired 20 years ago, I was one of 4 finalists who were interviewed by the full board. And of course, none of you were on the board then. And there was also a component of senior staff at the agency that interviewed the finalists and gave the board their input on that. I've also recommended that you involve the chair of the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority because we provide staff services to the authority. We're paid between $300,000 and $400,000 a year to do that. I am the executive officer of the authority as well. It's that arrangement is through a memorandum of understanding between us, the Association of Bay Area Governments, and the authority. And I think it'd be a good idea to seek some input from them, since that has become a large part of our work. Johanna Collins, who is our HR chief, has joined us for this part of the meeting. She will be available to staff both the advisory subcommittee and the full board, and handle both the logistics and also make sure that proper state procedures are followed in the hiring process. And I want to say for the record, just since Johanna's here and she's listening, and there's a lot of other staff listening, that she is the best HR person that I have had the pleasure of working with in 40 years of my professional life. So if you do what she tells you to do, you will not get into trouble. And she has kept me out of trouble for a number of years here. You, as a full board, can interview finalists in closed session, and you can discuss their qualifications, and you can vote on who you wish to hire in closed session, and then you would come out of closed session and announce who you've chosen. Ms. Collins can help you with reference checks at whatever point in the process that you'd like to do it. I think it should take 6 to 8 months to do this if you start today. And as I mentioned in the memo that I wrote, we have an internal Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion committee. It's quite large. We have, as a matter of practice, been involving them in hires at the Coastal Conservancy to make sure that we, meet our equity goals. The members of that committee are, ready, willing, and able to be involved in this process in any way that you all might like. So that concludes my presentation on the first and probably most crucial item on the agenda today.
Well, Sam, I'm going to jump in before you finish your entire report, because we might as well deal with this business as we have to today. First of all, I am sure that every member of our board has very deep thoughts about this. And I do too, because I have loved working with you all these years. But we will find a time, an appropriate time for all of us to express ourselves about Sam, and also for other members of the public to do it, because one thing that I've found is that Sam has a national reputation, and we have benefited very much from that. I think unless anyone has other thoughts, I think Sam's memo is a good map for us to follow. All members of our board will participate in this process and decision. I'd like to recommend, though, that we do appoint a subcommittee or an ad hoc committee, if you will, of 2 people to do the legwork, the groundwork for this process, and to work with Joanna Collins in that regard. I'd like to propose that Annie and Brian be those 2 people. They are senior members of our board. Annie, of course, has huge outreach to the entire resource-related community. Brian is the representative for the Resources Agency, which may very well have an interest in this, and he can be a go-between in that respect. So, I mean, any one of you could easily do this. I think it's going to take some time, and I've already asked Annie and Brian if they would be willing to commit that amount of time, and I think they would. So I'd like to recommend that, unless there's some objection to it or some other suggestions. Hearing none, why don't we go ahead and do that? I also wanted to make one comment that we all know that we have very qualified staff people, 1 or 2 of whom, or maybe more, may want to apply for this position too. And certainly nothing in our process would prevent that. We certainly don't want to act as if people who have committed a lot of time and effort to make this conservancy a success would not be given every opportunity to compete in this recruitment. So having said that, Sam, why don't you consider or continue with your report? Unless, does anyone want to?
I was just going to say that I think I appreciate your confidence in me. I think I do, having recently retired myself, I have some time right now to put into this. And, I also think that it's very important that we do a thorough search to make sure that we're tapping into the rich diversity of talent that is in California. So I'm very committed to working with the JEDI committee and others to make sure we do we really get the best and brightest.
Good.
And Mr.
Good
Chair,
luck.
I'm happy to move a subcommittee of Annie and Annie Nothoff and Brian Cash, if you want a motion.
Okay, good. And we have a, excuse me, Mr. Padilla, did you second that? Okay, I thought you were raised your hand. All right. I'll just say that that was approved without objection, or should we take a roll call vote?
Yes.
Amy Roach, do they need to take a roll call vote?
I think this can be informal. If there's no objection to unanimous roll call, I think that's fine.
All right.
Okay.
Why don't we do that?
I certainly have no objection. I think those ideas are excellent, the ones that Sam outlined in his memo. And I can't think of two better people to spearhead this effort than Annie and Brian.
Well, good luck, you guys. We'll be hearing from you from time to time, I'm sure.
Have fun. Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
When I was in Congress, I used to think it was such a privilege to nominate people for one of the military academies. And I soon found out it really isn't. When you nominate someone, you've made one really good friend and about 30 really bad enemies. And their families. So recruitment is not an easy thing. It isn't, but I think we have two good people to help, and as well as Joanna and all of our board, we'll make a good stab at it. Hard shoes to fill. Well, Sam, do you want to continue?
Yes. Yeah. And thank you for doing that. I'm really glad that you're going to have a process in addition to equity and diversity considerations. I just think it's very important that the next executive officer enjoy the confidence of this board the way that I have, and having a thorough process is part of how you do that and launch the next person. So Doug talked about our excellent staff people. One of our most excellent staff people is one of my deputies, Amy Hutzel. Amy is going to make her annual report on our progress towards the strategic plan.
Right. Good morning, Chairman Bosco and members of the board, and I'm hoping you all can hear me well. Yeah, I guess this is not the most exciting presentation at this board meeting. It's already been relegated to at least number 2, but I will aim for number 2. So I'm giving the strategic plan progress report. We've just finished year 3 of 5 in our 2018 through 2022 strategic plan. And I would say, despite the pandemic and the challenges of 2020, we've made very good progress at meeting the objectives and the numerical targets. And as Sam was saying earlier, that's really thanks to a great staff at the Coastal Conservancy, and that includes the project and legal staff, but also really great staff on the administrative side, and I just especially want to thank our contracts and accounting staff who have kept our projects moving forward, the grant agreements and invoices. So I'm going to talk about highlights from 2020, intermixed with some of the overall progress in the past 3 years under our 6 program areas in the strategic plan. So first is Explore the Coast, which is the broad category for our public access work. Some of the highlights include coastal trail projects, construction projects in Crescent City and Carrington Ranch in Sonoma County, We now have 52% of our existing coastal trails signed. Our goal is 100%. So we've got quite a bit of work to do over the next 2 years. And hopefully, this past year has been challenging signing the coastal trail during the pandemic. So hopefully we will get a chance to do a signage push in the last 2 years. Other access projects include the Tunitas Creek Beach acquisition near Half Moon Bay, Avila Pier and Capitola Wharf renovations, and the Crystal Cove Cottages Phase 2, which is one of our lower cost overnight accommodation projects. And then, of course, our Explore the Coast grant round, which we've done annually and has really helped us far exceed our targeted goals for getting people to the coast and creating great experiences for them. Our second program, Protect and Restore the Coast. Some of the highlights include the Newland Marsh acquisition in the Huntington Beach Wetlands Complex, the Dutchville Creek Parkway acquisition near Monte Rio in Sonoma County. Of course, the Liberty Canyon Wildlife Crossing in LA, the final engineering work for that project. Natural and working land easements in San Luis Obispo County, Hill Ranch, Nicholson Ranch, San Luis Obispo Creek Farm. And then as part of a broader effort on forest management, we funded the Amamutsan Tribal Band to start a cultural burning program on the Central Coast that we're very excited about. In our Climate Ready program, we are exceeding our goals for planning and implementing climate adaptation projects. And that's kind of despite not having a dedicated funding source for the Climate Ready program. 15 of these projects have been in communities that have faced systemic inequities and challenges, greater challenges faced in the future due to climate change. So examples of some of these Climate Ready programs include the Barrio Logan Climate Resiliency Community Project in San Diego, the Palo Alto Horizontal Levee Project, the Elk River Estuary Restoration Project on Humboldt Bay, and the Dirt World Bike Park Urban Greening in the city of Richmond. Moving on to our geographic programs, there's the Santa Ana River Parkway. The plan was approved by the board in 2018. So far, we have funded 11 access projects and 7 habitat enhancement projects, both planning and construction projects. We have a ways to go to meet our goals, but we continue to push that project. We have dedicated funding for this geographic program. We did complete construction of a trail at Prado Dam this year, and to help move our environmental education goals forward, we're going to run an Explore the River grant round this year. So we're very excited about that. In the San Francisco Bay Area, we continue to do multiple baylands restoration and sea level rise adaptation projects. Many of them in collaboration with the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority, which Sam talked about a bit already. Other highlights in the Bay Area include the final phase of the Napa River Oakville to Oak Knoll restoration, which we visited several years ago. Really terrific project in collaboration with private landowners on the Napa River. We accomplished an acquisition in Coyote Valley, which connects the Santa Cruz Mountains to the Diablo Range, a really critical wildlife connection, particularly for mountain lions. And then we continue to move forward Water Trail, Bay Trail, and Ridge Trail projects, although you'll see the Bay Trail construction numbers are low at this point, but we've got some things on the horizon. And then our 6th program area is our overarching category, Most of these do not include numerical targets, but the environmental justice objectives, we do have numerical targets. And one of our targets is that 35% of our funding will be invested in disadvantaged communities. And we are at 34% right now. So I think we're in a very good spot. And just to put that in raw numbers, that's $50 million invested in projects in disadvantaged communities over the past 3 years. So some of the key areas that we're a little behind on that we need to focus on in the next 2 years, perennially, it's constructing the coastal trail, which is just exceedingly challenging, but we continue to work to do that. Our lower cost overnight accommodations, we've had good progress on the planning and design of projects. We need to focus on the programmatic side, and we have ongoing conversations with state parks and coastal commission staff about that programming side. We're very interested in working with state parks to improve the reservation process for campsites and cabins on the coast, really the most critical part of, or the largest part of the existing lower cost overnight accommodations, and figuring out ways that the facilities can be better serving underserved communities. You know, we can't really build our way out of the dearth of lower cost overnight accommodations. We need to also focus on that programmatic side. Protecting working lands, we are behind on. Land acquisitions in the Bay Area, the numbers are relatively low. And as I mentioned, the Bay Trail construction. I think some of the challenges to meeting these objectives, besides, you know, just the regular challenges with moving projects forward, is on the funding side. So our Proposition 1 funding is close to gone. And then significant amounts of our Proposition 68 funding have been appropriated for a couple specific projects in the South Coast and in the San Francisco Bay Area. So in the Bay Area especially, that's going to make it hard to put funding towards some of these other projects. But with our remaining Prop 68, Prop 84, and environmental license plate funds, you know, I think we're going to come very close to meeting our objectives on the vast majority of these goals. And then Measure AA in the Bay Area is also a really great resource for us in terms of meeting the Baylands restoration goals. So with that, I will end. And if you have any questions, there's a full memo with lots of details and 4 pages of tables with lots of numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
And Gail and Brian, those numbers are for you. Are there any questions for Amy?
I'd just say it's impressive that we can make progress in such a challenging year. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, I wanted to echo something that Amy said, which is that it really did take a huge amount of staff work, particularly in the accounting and contracting side of the agency, who had to, while the airplane was in the air, reconfigure for working paperlessly, which we have mostly done. I would say we're sort of 90% paperless now. Unfortunately, some of our staff still have to go into the office to move pieces of paper around. Not all of our grantees, including a number of cities, actually are not, they're not on DocuSign yet. So we still get, you know, paper invoices, but it was a huge effort. And once we got through the turbulence, we were kind of back in action, which was fabulous. So thank you, Amy, for that report.
I'd like to say too that, you know, we are a lead agency for climate change, and I think all of us would agree that it's nice to have the United States back in the International Climate Accord. That happened quite quickly, didn't it, yesterday?
Yes. Yes, yesterday was a very productive day for the federal government, I thought. At your last board meeting, you had a discussion about doing restoration work in areas that have endangered species, which, as you might imagine, is a tricky thing. And so staff thought it might be useful to give you a presentation on a project that we were involved in, that we funded, and we're one of the lead agencies for, that did exactly that, a wetland restoration project in San Diego Bay. So Steve and Marcy can go look at it now. That involve wetland restoration with endangered species living right there. So our South Coast manager, Megan Cooper, is going to kick this off, I think, and we have a presentation from Andy Ewan, who's with the Fish and Wildlife Service in San Diego Bay. And I want to just remind you all that you have in your packet a 10-year update report on this project. So go ahead, Megan.
Good morning. My name is Andy Ewan, and I'm the project leader for the San Diego National Wildlife Refuge Complex. We manage, protect, and restore salt marshes and estuaries at National Wildlife Refuges at Seal Beach, San Diego Bay, and Tijuana Estuary, all in Southern California. I will share with you the 10-year update on a successful salt marsh restoration project in South San Diego Bay, a project that includes multiple partners, including the California Coastal Conservancy on both Refuge and Port of San Diego lands. As shown on the left, in 1859, San Diego Bay was a fertile, shallow, flat-bottom bay with adjacent mudflat and salt marsh habitats, encompassing approximately 18,500 acres. By 2000, only 30% of San Diego Bay's historic salt marsh habitat and only 16% of its original intertidal mudflat habitat remained. On the right is the area that we restored as part of this San Diego Bay Coastal Wetland Restoration and Enhancement Project. This was an effort to restore lost habitats in South San Diego Bay and included the Chula Vista Wildlife Reserve and the Western Salt Ponds located within the San Diego Bay National Wildlife Refuge. The Western Salt Ponds were converted to salt ponds about 60 years ago, while the salt ponds to the east or to the right are still used to produce salt and were created about 100 years ago. Through a long-term public planning process for the refuge's long-term management plan and an environmental impact statement for the restoration project, we developed a phased restoration of the refuge's salt ponds that including restoring tidal circulation and salt marsh habitat in various salt ponds. This phased approach allowed the service to restore a few of the ponds at a time, collect data, and learn about the effects of the restoration, and then apply what we have learned to the next phase of restoration. We chose the Western Salt Ponds to begin because they were rarely used by nesting seabirds and provided little habitat for rare species such as the endangered light-footed ridgeways rail and the state endangered Belding savanna sparrow. Along with the Conservancy, NOAA Fisheries, and our scientific partners, we developed a restoration design that included cutting tidal channels through ponds 10 and 11, depositing the dredged sediment from pond 10 into pond 11, and breaching the levees to restore tidal circulation to ponds 10, 10A, and 11. And this was the first time in 60 years that these ponds were tidally and biologically connected to San Diego Bay. Our decision-making was guided by our prioritizing the recovery of endangered and threatened species and their habitats, and providing ecosystem-level benefits to a multitude of species, including providing nursery habitat for fish and eelgrass habitat. We made trade-offs for species at risk that are restricted to rare and unique habitats found only along the Southern California Bight versus species that have larger ranges and wider habitat distributions. A restoration site looks a lot like an active construction zone. Because we are moving tons and tons of dirt, we use heavy equipment, including excavators, bulldozers, dredges, pumps, and trucks. Construction within the Western Salt Ponds began in February 2011 and was completed by December of 2011. This was then followed by planting cordgrass and other salt marsh plants in the marsh muds, which, as you can see, was quite challenging and messy. The levees were immediately breached to restore, again, the ebb and flow of the bay's tidal current to the salt ponds. Pre-project monitoring occurred for 1 year prior to construction to establish existing baseline conditions. Before restoration, fish diversity and abundance in the salt ponds was very low, as was the diversity of benthic invertebrates and birds. Post-construction monitoring began immediately after planting was complete. Researchers collected physical data from the site on changes in tidal ranges and water quality, and biological data related to plants, fish, benthic invertebrates, and birds. At the completion of 5 years of monitoring, the Western Salt Pond site have met their project goals and objectives for most physical and biological parameters. Vegetation and water quality monitoring were extended for a total of 10 years after construction. Since the breaching of the levees and the establishment of mudflat and salt marsh vegetation, the endangered light-footed ridge rail and the state-listed Belding savanna sparrows have been observed within the restored western ponds. Fish-eating species like the osprey, great blue heron, belted kingfisher, and the California least tern can be observed flying over the site during higher tides and along the project's channels. During low tides, an array of shorebirds, herons, and egrets can be observed foraging the shallow tidal waters and along the exposed mudflats. Captive-bred light-footed ridge-raised rail were released into the project site for the first time in 2016. Again, evidence of the significant biological value and richness of this new area. The Bayshore Bikeway and Bayside Birding and Walking Trail, funded by the California Coastal Conservancy, border the western salt ponds. Here, the public enjoys the opportunity to witness the transformation of this area from isolated, biologically poor salt ponds to a rich mosaic of open tidal waters, mudflats, and salt marsh. These vantage points are a favorite destination for bird watchers, photographers, runners, walkers, kids, and families, and a location where citizen scientists can post their observation on eBird or iNaturalist. We are incredibly proud of this restoration project and the partnerships that made it happen, particularly with the support and leadership of the California Coastal Conservancy. These partners, who provided funding, support, manual labor, and encouragement, were all honored in 2013 as recipients of the Coastal America Partnership for Action Award. We appreciate and acknowledge the Conservancy's major role in the success of this project and look forward to continuing to assist the Conservancy in restoring and protecting California's outstanding coastal resources. Thank you for your time today, and I am on the line if you have any questions. Thank you.
So, Andy, did the seahorse in your next to last slide survive its close encounter with that great blue heron?
Well, the other picture was it actually in the mouth of the great blue heron. So I think it became dinner.
Yeah. Okay. So you spared us the nature red of tooth and claw photo there.
Yes, in that particular case. But it does show how amazingly these areas come back once you restore them. bring back tidal circulation, get the elevations right so that you can get these shallow, productive intertidal habitats restored. So thank you again for your support on that project and for the Bayside Birding and Walking Trail. It's been a tremendous addition to the South Bay community and to the city of Imperial Beach, which borders the south end of San Diego and the Refuge.
Looks like Steve has a question. Yeah.
No, just a comment, Mr. Chair, if it's appropriate. I could certainly go after questions. I just want to, it's nice to see you, Andy, again. It's been a little bit, and brought back a lot of memories of the road that led to the initiation of this restoration and the work that's been done since. And to your comments just now, when done right, it really is amazing to see the reawakening, the rebirth, frankly, of some of these incredible resources, and you know, the natural and even public and public health benefits that it brings just to the ecosystem and to the community that can appreciate it and benefit from it. So congratulations. This is cool. And I like the slides too. So thank you again.
Thank you. And it's actually amazing what has also transpired is that the city of Imperial Beach put in a new trail that complements the Bayside Birding and Walking Trail that the Conservancy funded. And there's a bikeway village. You know, it's engendered you know, more interest in and around the area. So again, tremendous downstream effects from the support of the Conservancy.
And Doug, you'll be happy to know that your friend Greg Cox was involved in the bikeway village.
I thought of him throughout all of this. I'm amazed he's not in front of us today, but you know, I wanted to comment that as we saw earlier and during our public comment, is the use of heavy equipment always seems to be controversial in these projects, and it certainly is in Biona. But you successfully used quite a bit of heavy equipment in this project. Isn't that true?
Yes, and for many of these projects, we're moving large amounts of sediment and soil around in order to raise the elevation of the salt marsh to address sea level rise, or to remove fill so that we can restore salt marsh habitat that was filled historically. And all of that requires the use of excavators, dredges, heavy trucks, you know, to move that material around. And we also have design specifications. So in the case of the South Bay salt pond restorations, we excavated channels to ensure that there was great tidal circulation so that we could ensure that there was good flushing, provided habitat for marine fish. These areas are nurseries. So all of that is done with heavy equipment, and it is a disturbance, and it's something that you have to balance. And of course, we had expert biologists monitoring the activity during construction, and then we did have follow-up monitoring to ensure that we in fact did make a better with the project than what we had originally.
I think Joseph had a question, and then Annie.
Either way, I first of all, Andy, my name's Joe. It's great to see your presentation. I want to join people in congratulating you. That is, I think that is a remarkable result, and it's wonderful to see. I just had a question whether or not there might be any plans in place to continue your work in the eastern salt ponds of the Bay.
Well, actually, that's a great question, because as part of this process, we had done a long-term management plan. It's what we call our comprehensive conservation plan. And in that plan, we do envision the future restoration of the rest of the salt ponds in a phased approach. And in fact, through the California Coastal Commission, we're working with their scientific advisory panel and Poseidon Water to restore additional salt ponds, about 125 acres more of salt ponds that were identified in our comprehensive conservation plan. So we are using that plan to restore more salt marsh habitats in the south end of San Diego Bay. It's actually been a great to see a management plan get implemented.
Great, terrific.
Annie?
Well, my question was just, so you said that you did the heavy construction work in the year 2011, right? From starting in February. So then what was the timeline when the area was made accessible to the public and folks could start enjoying the area again? Is there
So
a gap there?
right. So the area we restored were part of the South Bay Salt Works. So it was part of their salt making operation, and we took 3 of their ponds out of circulation. So those 3 ponds bordered the Bayshore bikeway, but the public wasn't really allowed on the salt ponds. They were accessible along the edge for bird watching and viewing, bike riding and hiking. And then a few years ago, we through the funding of the Conservancy built the Bayside Birding and Walking Trail, which parallels the Bayshore Bikeway, and it's right next to the restored ponds, but they're not in the ponds themselves. They're on the edge, and from there they've got great views of the restored areas.
Thank you.
And how long, Andy, was the heavy machinery in operation before it started taking on some semblance of a more natural environment?
Well, one of our challenges was that in one of the slides we showed a little sandy beach, and we had slurried over some material from the Port of San Diego's Chula Vista Wildlife Reserve. And during construction, the endangered California least tern took a liking to the beach and to the sandy area. And so we actually had the least tern nesting during the construction period in and amongst the heavy equipment. So our biologist was kept very busy moving and timing the construction activities. Literally, when we cut open the channel to the bay, that opportunity for fish to move in, but we were surprised at how quickly things moved back in and how quickly the area recovered once construction was over.
Did you have a sense of what that time frame was? I know it's been 10 years, so.
Oh, right. Well,
Yeah.
within a year, we had rapid recruitment by this annual salt marsh plants. And then we had kind of kick-started some of the restoration by putting in plugs of plants and putting plants in. But within a year, we were already getting vegetation starting to grow in the marsh, so in the restored area. So again, it was there must have been some seed banks still in the sediment, and once it got exposed back to tidal circulation, the ebb and flow of the tides that allowed those salt marsh plants to either float in or to be sprouting from a seed bank. So we were happy that it actually recovered very quickly. We, as we said in the slide, did not hit all of our targets within the 5-year periods, and it was the percent cover and the height of the plants. In 2015, there was, as you may recall, unusually high tides, warm waters throughout Southern California, and that resulted in a dieback of cordgrass throughout Southern California. So without that kind of regional understanding of what was going on that the Conservancy has promoted amongst wetland managers in Southern California, that helped us understand why we had some setbacks.
Are there any other questions for Andrew or for Megan?
Congratulations. I can't wait to go visit, hopefully this weekend even. Yeah, congratulations on this great work.
It's
Well,
fabulous bird watching. Bring your binoculars.
I don't know if that's happening, but we'll try.
And actually at 10th Street, we do have a set of scopes as part of the Bayside Birding and Walking Trail, compliments of the of the Coastal Conservancy. So, again, we couldn't have done it without the support of the Conservancy, both at the biological end of restoring these areas, as well as making these areas accessible to the public so that they have an area that they can love and enjoy, and particularly in the COVID-19 pandemic, someplace where they can go outside and walk and hike and explore. So thank you again for the support.
Thank you, Andy.
Doug, we have one person, I think, who wants to do a public comment on this item. So I will call on Walter Lamb, who has his hand up.
Thank you. I did not intend to comment again. I appreciate just try to take a little extra time. Congratulations on your project. That's great. I'm also a bird watcher. I'd love to go down, bring my daughter and check that out. Because of the connection that was made to Biona, I think that's actually a really good point, because there are, so first of all, there's nothing in our challenge to the Biona EIR that has anything to do with bulldozers. We're not, that's not really the issue for us. And so I think it's really important. Use a medical analogy. You have two different patients and you need to devise a plan for both patients. In this case, and Mr. Yoon, I don't know if you have any comment on this, but I mentioned earlier the fact that the Biona EIR acknowledges the loss of wetland habitat over time due to sea level rise. Is there any sea level rise? And I know it's not Q&A, so you don't have to answer. Maybe we can connect offline. And I think it'd be really good to compare the issues that we're seeing with the Biona wetlands to help answer some of the questions. There's obviously some interest from the board members about how your project compares to the Biona wetlands project. And it's gonna be really important to understand what the actual criticisms are of the Biona project, which I know is not your project. But I'm wondering, possibly could you talk about, whether there was any thin layer sediment augmentation? You talked about raising elevations, not lowering elevations. Was that, a plan? And again, if you'd prefer to take it offline, I'd be happy to do that as well.
Sure, I'd be happy to take a stab at it. First, I have not been involved at all with the Biona project, so any of the details related to the Biona Wetland Restoration Project, I'm not part of. On the thin layer sediment augmentation project, we actually did the first augmentation project at the Seal Beach National Wildlife Refuge, again, participation with the Coastal Conservancy and many other partners to raise the marsh elevation by spraying sediment onto the marsh. So it's a possibility. On the South San Diego Bay Wetland Restoration, we actually raised the elevation in one of the salt ponds. We actually filled it at Pond 11 with sediment that we excavated from Pond 10. And the goal there was to get the elevations so that cordgrass and other salt marsh habitat plants could grow. So we intentionally moved material from Pond 10 to raise the elevation in Pond 11, basically filling Pond 11, so that we could get additional salt marsh habitat rather than the mudflat habitat that would have been there. Because if you look at the scope of the project, we have lots of intertidal mudflat.
That's very helpful. And I really appreciate that. I'll close because I know I'm past my time. And I'll just leave with this thought. So there's a lot to discuss about Biona, and we always get a little bit concerned if it seems like, there's a sort of superficial conversation that's not actually addressing the key points. So let's make sure we have those actual discussions about the Biona wetlands, which cordgrass was never historically present. So that's another interesting factor. But we are eager, hopefully, to work with, with the commission, with the Conservancy staff to make sure that all those questions get answered. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, that concludes the EO report for today.
Okay, thank you very much, Sam. And we'll now move on to the project part of our agenda. And the first project is on the North Coast and agenda item number 6. And Julia Elkin will present that. Julia?
Thank you, Chairman Bosco and members of the State Coastal Conservancy Board. This is Julia Elkin, and I will be presenting the Elk River Recovery Estuary Feasibility Study and Conceptual Designs Project. Staff recommends that the Conservancy Board authorize disbursement of up to $400,000 to California Trout Incorporated to conduct planning activities for anadromous fish habitat enhancement and flood reduction in the lower Elk River watershed in Humboldt County. The Elk River is Humboldt Bay's largest freshwater tributary. On this map, you can see the full extent of the watershed in gray. And currently, the river is listed by the US EPA and the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board under Section 303D of the Clean Water Act as a sediment-impaired water body, where high sediment loads negatively impact beneficial uses along the river, impairing coho salmon habitat opportunities and exacerbating storm flooding events. While these are watershed scale issues, the planning project before you today is specifically for a smaller geographic scope, the tidally influenced lowermost reaches of the Elk River, which are shown here in red. Here's another view of the project planning area relative to the full extent of the Elk River system. So our project planning area consists of those lowermost tidally influenced river reaches, shown here on this map as MSR1 and MSR2. Here in the lower Elk, the river's flow capacity has been reduced as high sediment loads from upstream have caused the riverbed to aggrade in places and allowed vegetation to grow in the river's main stem channel. These shifts in the system have caused nuisance flooding from winter storms to increase over the past decade. Here you see flooding on a private road within the proposed study area during a recent winter storm. In this image, you see an active agricultural property within the project area during low flow conditions on the left, and the same property during high flow conditions on the right. These impacts to working agricultural lands and local infrastructure are anticipated to worsen with climate change, as the intensity of storm events is projected to increase. Currently, there is a total maximum daily load, or TMDL process, underway to address the Elk River watershed's high sediment loads. While the TMDL is a regulatory tool, it includes two non-regulatory components. One of these is the Elk River Recovery Assessment, a report which details existing and possible future conditions for the full river system under a range of different management scenarios. That assessment was funded in part by the Coastal Conservancy and completed in 2019. The second non-regulatory component of the TMDL process is called the Elk River Watershed Stewardship Program. The Watershed Stewardship Program convenes landowners and stakeholders to address impairments and aggradation specifically in the lower Elk River. So the project before you today builds immediately upon the Elk River Recovery Assessment and directly supports the work of the Elk River Watershed Stewardship Program. Grant funds will be used to produce a planning level feasibility study and work with willing landowners, regulators, and regional stakeholders in the lower Elk to develop stakeholder-supported preliminary conceptual restoration and enhancement design concepts. These will explore options for winter flood flow routing and floodplain connectivity opportunities, the protection of agricultural working lands, and the restoration of estuarine and tidal marsh habitat for the benefit of listed salmonids. Here you can see the full 480-acre Lower Elk River project planning area shown within the black boundary on this map. In red are two adjacent wetland restoration and fish habitat enhancement projects funded by the Coastal Conservancy, the Martin Slough Enhancement Project and the City of Eureka's Elk River Estuary Restoration Project. All of these projects reflect shared priorities of addressing flooding impacts in the Elk River system while enhancing habitat for coho salmon and other wetland and riverine restoration benefits. Collectively, these projects are increasing the resilience and health of the Elk River watershed. This project's Proposition 1 application scored highly in staff reviews. As a multi-benefit project, this project furthers both the wetland restoration and anadromous fish habitat enhancement priorities of the Proposition 1 funding round, while also benefiting agricultural working lands. The project has support from multiple agencies, including the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board and funding from the Wildlife Conservation Board. The project team is ready to begin work upon securing Coastal Conservancy grant funding. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Marissa Adams, North Coast Project Manager for CalTrout. Ms. Adams will share some brief comments on the project, and then we'll both be available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Marissa Adams. I work for California Trout and I manage our Elk River projects out of the Arcata office. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to make a couple points. Our project, our Elk River program director on this project is Darren Maru, and we work closely with Northern Hydrology and Engineering and Stillwater Sciences as part of our technical team, all of whom have been involved in working on the Elk River for decades. So thank you for considering this incredible restoration opportunity on the lower Elk River, where we have 480 acres at the mouth of Humboldt Bay and 8 willing landowners, including CDFW's Elk River Wildlife Property, which has been languishing and in need of a restoration plan. To quickly recap some of the information in the proposal, the project area is confined by Highway 101 on the bottom, and then the Valley Wall and Elk River Road on either side, and an organic dairy at the top called Alexander Dairy. And as the photo of the flood flows flowing over a road showed, primary problem here is that during flood events, the river goes out of bank in the upper reaches and then spills into the floodplain where it persists for extremely long periods of time. And that is, impacting not only land value, but agricultural land productivity, because the worms in the agricultural land are drowned. And also the ecology in the stream estuary ecotone. So improving these drainage patterns is the primary impetus between those agricultural landowners be willing to engage with us and the stewardship program. So CalTrout and our project team have been working with these landowners over the past 2 years under the Elk River Stewardship Program, which to date has been entirely funded by the State Water Resources Control Board. Under that umbrella of that program, each landowner has expressed preliminary support for our preliminary concepts, which include levee modifications to restore tidal activity on the 99 acre CDFW property, restoration and reconnection of Swain Slough, which is one of a series of relic channels that runs throughout the valley bottom, modifying drainage infrastructure like tide gates and culverts, also intended to direct flood flows to newly restored areas like the CDFW property, topographic modifications to consolidate and route flood flows, many of which are could be slight topographic modifications or achieved through actions like lowering the old railroad berm that travels throughout the whole Elk River watershed, and vegetation management in the channel itself. So like I said, CalTrout's been actively engaging with these landowners on an ongoing basis. And these landowners have expressed an interest in future acquisition, easements, and a potential land swap. So I do believe that these are all highly probable future outcomes of this planning effort. And I just wanted to note that this project would also leverage many of the products completed under the stewardship program, including extensive landowner and agency outreach and the initial vetting of the concepts being proposed, the Elk River Recovery Assessment, which was funded by the state board and is a conceptual model for the watershed, a really sophisticated hydrodynamic and sediment transport model that was developed to support the Elk River Sediment TMDL. That's an incredible tool that's usually only developed to, clean up pollution spills that we will have at our disposal and we'll be able to further refine using the products developed under this planning effort. And also under the stewardship program, we're developing a climate change study plan that will begin to look at the effect of sea level rise and atmospheric rivers on the Elk River. So our scope's basically divided into 5 tasks: project management, meetings, regulatory compliance, baseline conditions assessment, and 10% conceptual design. And the intent here is to package up our products into a easy to understand conceptual design report and baseline conditions report that could support future fundraising and planning efforts. So thank you very much for your consideration of the project, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions, either of Marissa or Julia on item 6?
I was just going to say that I hope it starts raining soon so that we would need these flood control measures.
Yeah. Honestly, the landowners are very happy for a low rain year. We're also working on the South Fork, and we're happy to have less rain right now because we're able to get out there and do our habitat typing.
Okay, do I hear a motion and second for?
Doug, I think we have one public comment on this.
Oh,
item.
okay.
So that's Roy Vanderhoek. So go ahead and unmute yourself, Roy.
Okay, let's just go ahead with the.
I move for the passage of item 6.
Okay, Mr. Cash moves. Ms. Nodoff, do you want a second?
I think that was Ali. Was that?
That was Alioto.
Yeah, that was Alioto.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Mr. Alioto moves, Ms. Nodoff seconds that we approve item 6. And will you please call the roll?
Yes, Ms. Nodoff,
Aye.
Mr. Padilla,
Aye.
Mr. Cash,
Aye.
Ms. Miller,
Aye.
Ms. Gutierrez Grummage,
Aye.
Mr. Alioto,
Aye.
Chair Bosco.
Aye.
This motion passed. Agenda item number 6 is approved.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to item number 7, which is going to be presented by Michael Bowen. Michael, we haven't seen you for a while. Oh.
Hello, Chairman Bosco, members of the board. I'm Michael Bowen of the North Coast Work Group. I'm presenting today for your consideration and possible authorization a proposal to grant $279,491 to the Scott River Watershed Council for the proposed Scott River Dredge Tailings Restoration Design. As you see, we find ourselves far from the coast at the foot of Mount Shasta, and you may wonder why this item is before the Coastal Conservancy. Although Shasta is far from the coast as the crow flies, it is not too distant as the salmon swim, The Scott and Shasta rivers at the base of Mount Shasta were historically among the most productive contributors to the extensive salmon runs of the mighty Klamath River. As with the McKinney Creek project on consent, also in Siskiyou County, these mid and upper Klamath tributaries historically played and will play an increasingly important role in salmon recovery, following the planned removal of 4 major dams on the Klamath River beginning next year, an historic achievement supported extensively in its early development stages by the Coastal Conservancy. Before I present the project, I'd like to provide some historic context. One of the more enduring myths of the California Gold Rush is perpetuated by these iconic images of rugged individualists seeking their fortune with picks and pans, occasionally cooperating in good faith when necessary. The reality of the gold rush was quite different. Hand in glove with the genocidal violence characterizing that period of our history lay a well-capitalized, well-organized infrastructure that operated on an industrial scale and that laid waste to vast swaths of the landscape. The photo of the dredger on the lower right is taken along the Klamath River, and that style of extraction is responsible for the current condition of the project site. The destruction left behind is still very much with us today, including along the Scott River and its tributaries. And though it's not obvious from the air, it is apparent on the ground. The after effects usually take the form of disconnected floodplains, extensive mine tailings, and heavily aggraded channels, mostly devoid of vegetation or other living matter. These inhospitable moonscapes are not ideal habitat for fish or other living things. These days, one can walk across the river on the backs of dismal graphs, charting in great complexity the problems facing our salmon populations. But when displayed on the time frame of our state history, the graph is quite simple. In many instances, our salmon populations have passed or rest on the brink of collapse or extirpation. This brings us to our proposed project. Great problems require ambitious solutions, and this is certainly an ambitious undertaking. The Scott River Watershed Council aims to redesign 2¼ miles of the Scott River within the Callahan dredger tailings to restore once productive habitat for a variety of river-dependent species. The proposed project will address 3 distinct but related components of the restoration of the 2.27-mile reach of the Scott River, shown in Exhibit 1 of your staff report. Starting at the upstream end, at the bottom of the map, Component 2 will create 2 acres of in-channel and off-channel cold water habitat, such as seasonally flooded back channels and ponds between the Scott River and Sugar Creek. This type of habitat is vital for juvenile salmon and other species. 4,000 feet downstream of that, Component 1 will improve river connectivity for migration through 1.1 miles of the tailings. This component is partially funded by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Component 3 lies between 1 and 2 and addresses 2 design constraints to be evaluated under this grant. First, the potential for mercury contamination in the mine tailings, and second, an active water diversion in the area that must be protected. But this area also offers the potential for project expansion and additional floodplain restoration in the future. In Siskiyou County, where cutting green tape is a way of life, the Scott River Watershed Council has already constructed nearby pilot projects to test restoration approaches. In any other setting, these pilot projects would constitute significant projects in their own right, and they show great promise. Efforts include floodplain reterracing and willow planting, as shown on the lower left, installation of wood structures to provide resting habitat for juvenile fish, as shown on the upper left, and the installation of so-called beaver dam analogs on the right, wood structures that slow water, force floodplain inundation, and mimic natural processes beneficial to a variety of plant and animal species. Simply put, the goal is to take the landscape on the left and conduct an ecological reboot to achieve habitat like that shown on the right. With that, I'll conclude my presentation and respond to any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Are there any questions or comments?
I think Michael did a good job of anticipating our questions in his presentation. So no, I don't have any.
Well, Michael, you certainly have to be commended for the scope of the projects that you've taken on. Most of these are really major efforts, and congratulations for working with all these groups that come into play with your projects. Okay, well, if there's no comments or questions, who would like to move approval? Okay, Ms. Miller moves. Mr. Cash, would you like to second that motion?
Sure.
All right, been moved and seconded that we approve item 7. Oh, I guess, are there any public comments on this?
No, no public comments.
All right, Anne, would you please call the roll?
Yes, Ms. Noddle,
Aye.
Mr. Padilla,
Aye.
Mr. Cash,
Aye.
Ms. Miller,
Aye, sorry.
Ms. Gutierrez Grounded,
Aye.
Mr. Alioto,
Aye.
Chair Bosco.
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda item number 7 is approved.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you all very much. And I would just like to say, as my first remote meeting, what a real joy it is to see all of you again. It's been a strange year, but I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Good to see you too. All right, next we'll go on to item 8, which will be presented by Peter Jarosz.
Thank you, Chairman Bosco and members of the State Coastal Conservancy for the opportunity to present the Klamath River at Horse Trough Springs Floodplain Connection Design Project. Staff recommends that the Conservancy authorize disbursement of up to $341,607 of Proposition 1 funds to the Mid-Klamath Watershed Council to prepare designs, permit applications, and conduct environmental review to reconnect a floodplain to the Klamath River. Slide 2 has a regional map of the project location. Look for the green star in the middle of the map and a detailed map of the project site on the Klamath River. Before I get into the details of the project itself, it is important to consider where the need for the project came from. Slide 3 has a historic photograph of the hydraulic mining that took place on the Klamath River. This slide shows us a long berm which was used to divert the main stem of the river so that it could be mined. Slide 4, another historic photograph, also shows us the incredible volume of rock that the miners were able to move and how they sluiced away the majority of the fine materials in their search for gold. Slide 5 shows us a picture of the project area from 1941 and one from the present. Despite the passage of 80 years and many strong winter storms that one would assume would put the river back together again, the river still shows the damage that was done by mining. Slide 6 shows us an aerial image of the project site. And slide 7 contains the conceptual design plans for how the floodplain will be reconnected to the river. The goal of restoring a connection to the floodplain, as seen in the photograph on slide 8, is to improve habitat for salmonids. During winter storms, when the flows are high, juvenile fish can find refuge in the slower moving water on the floodplain. This project is also important because it is the area's first attempt to directly tackle the legacy of mining and will provide a great deal of information for how to tackle similar projects throughout the region. If you have any questions about the project, I'm available to answer them now.
Are there any questions for Peter? Yeah.
Peter, my name is Joe.
Go ahead.
Joe Alioto. Yeah, thank you. There's obvious similarities between this project and the last project that Mr. Bowen presented, and I was just wondering, and I'm sure you could confirm that you all are in touch about, I would think, strategizing the correction of these mining issues in similar fashions.
Yes, absolutely. Typically, we actually share an office and sit back to back, so it was easier prior to the pandemic. But definitely, we're in communication about this. And Michael actually worked on the predecessor to this project, which was a regional look and planning effort at looking at mine tailing remediation in the area. So he's definitely well familiar with what this project is proposing.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'd like to comment about the Klamath. A lot is happening there now, including the removal of the dams. And thank goodness, the Klamath once produced 1/3 of all the salmon and steelhead on the California coast. And now, as we know, it's down to a small fraction of that. 40 years ago, I carried the Klamath Restoration Act in Congress, which gave $100 million for restoration of the Klamath, and another bill, the Trinity Restoration, gave an equal amount. But it shows how long it's taken to really get to the point where we're getting serious about restoring that river's watershed. 40 years, and all that time, can you imagine the amount of prosperity that was lost from not doing it? These days our fishermen are always lacking jobs and their industry is always faltering when none of that had to happen. But I'm very personally happy to see these kind of projects, and I think our children and their children are going to benefit an awful lot from it. So having said that, who would like to move approval? Gail, how about you? All right. And Marcy, are you ready to second this?
Second.
Great. Okay. Are there any comments from the public? All right.
No comments.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that we approve item 8. Those in favor? Oh, no, go ahead, Ann. Please call the roll.
Yes. Ms. Nonoff?
Aye.
Mr. Padilla?
Aye.
Mr. Cash?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Gutierrez Granich?
Aye.
Mr. Alioto?
Aye.
Chair Bosco?
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda item number 8 is approved.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go back to Peter on item number 9. Peter Cherish.
Thank you again, Chairman Bosco and members of the State Coastal Conservancy for the opportunity to present the Klamath River Estuary Restoration Project. Staff recommends that the Conservancy authorize disbursement of up to $270,337 of Proposition 1 funds to the Resigini Rancheria to develop a fisheries and wetland restoration plan for lands owned by the Resigini Rancheria. As shown on the map on slide 2, the project is located on the Klamath River at the southern end of Del Norte County and just at the upper reaches of the extent of tidal influence. Slide 3 shows the exact location of the project, the lands that are owned by the Rancheria. These are the focus of the planning effort if funds are approved for the project. The picture on the upper right gives us an idea of what the vegetation is like and the proximity of the rancheria to the Klamath River. The picture on the lower right is the extent of wetlands in the area. As you can see, much of the rancheria is covered in wetland. Slide 4 has a map of the 100-year floodplain and a photograph from the project area. As can be seen from the wetland map on the previous slide and this map of the 100-year floodplain, it makes sense for this project to plan for fishery and wetland restoration for the entire rancheria, as there is important habitat spread across much of it. The waterways and wetlands on the Rezaghini Rancheria are important winter refugia in the lower Klamath Basin for endangered salmonids. Thousands of juvenile coho salmon enter Junior Creek Pond, which is on the Rancheria property, during rains in the fall and early winter. This includes fish tagged in various other Klamath reaches and tributaries. These fish then migrate to the ocean the following spring, after increasing in size considerably, which also increases ocean survival. Funds will be used to develop a tribal and community-driven wetland and fisheries restoration plan for the rancheria, as well as 30% designs for a select number of restoration projects. These projects will then be ready to seek additional funding. The project will also increase the tribe's capacity to undertake future fisheries restoration work. Slide 5 has another photo of the project site. Increasing the survival rate for salmonids in the Klamath Basin is a statewide priority and will also directly benefit the tribes along the river. The Rezaghini Rancheria is highly motivated to tackle this project. If you have any questions about the project, I am available to answer them now.
Thank you, Peter. Are there any questions or comments for Peter? All right, are there any public comments out there?
No public comments.
All right. Marcia, do you want to move approval of item 9? And how about Joe Aliotto? Would you like to second it? All right. Please call the roll, Ann.
Yes. Ms. Noto?
Aye.
Mr. Padilla?
Aye.
Mr. Cash?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Gutierrez Groundage?
Aye.
Mr. Aliotto?
Aye.
Chair Bosco?
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda number 9 is approved.
All right, that concludes the project portion of our agenda. And Sam, we do need to have a closed session, isn't that true? Yeah, Amy?
Yes, that is correct.
All right, then the way this works is we will recess this session, and members of the board, you should have been given a separate number to call for our closed session. And we'll go ahead and do that now. So we're recessed for the time being, pending the completion of our executive session.
And I think Steve is trying to tell us that he has to hop off.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate it. My apologies, Mr. Chairman. Just one for you. My colleagues, great to see you. Happy New Year. I do have to depart to another thing, so I won't be able to join you for the closed session, but I'm briefed on it. I've reviewed the memorandum. I understand it, what's going to be reported. So wish you all well, and we'll see you again very soon. Thanks.
Good to see you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Likewise. Bye.
And just as a, thank you, Steve. And just as a reminder, remember to mute your Zoom and turn off your video, and then call into the closed session number. And if you don't have that phone number, we're emailing it to you right now.
Okay, are we all here? That's going to be here?
That's, looks like it.
Yes.
All right, I'd like to report that the board in closed session considered litigation, the Biona wetland case and the Sonoma Land Trust case, excuse me, defend Biona matter and the Sonoma Land Trust matter, and the board took no action on either of those. Okay, so let's see. That concludes our business. We're going to have our next meeting on March 25th, and that will be a virtual meeting again. And thank you all for attending, and we'll talk with you in March. I'll pound the gavel on my desk.
Thank you.
Thank you,
See you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.